Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Using Camtasia Like a Designer Without Being One. My name is Jason Vallon, and I'm an instructional designer and master trainer here at TechSmith. But you're not here to listen to me. You're here to listen to our presenter and guest, my friend and fellow TechSmithy, Mr. Joe Dearman. Joe, how are we doing today?
Doing great. It's a beautiful day in the mitten. We've got a little, powdering of snow outside, and it's a nice crisp breeze out there. But really, mostly, I'm just extremely excited to be here with you all to do one of my favorite things. Well, two of my favorite things: design and video in Camtasia.
There you go. Well, we appreciate you being here. Joe is a senior user experience designer here at TechSmith, and he's been here, just as long as I have. I think better part of a decade. So we're happy you're here, Joe. Joe is going to be using the most current version of Camtasia, which is Camtasia 2022.4 on a Mac today. But everything he does on the Mac is transferable to the Windows machine. So if there's anything that's a little nuanced, we'll make sure we talk about that as well. So before we get Joe started, let's talk about a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the cool stuff. But first, we'll talk about the agenda. So today, the agenda was playing there before. We're going to talk about elevating your screen content with basic layout techniques, color, visual effects, little title treatments, adjustments to things that you can make really easily and very quickly to really kind of wow your audience. There is so much inside of Camtasia 2022 in terms of fills, overlays, color change capability. And we're also going to expose our blend mode effect with assets that are already available to you or readily available within the software itself. Now, I always joke, Joe, in all my other webinars, if anyone's ever been here, that I am not a designer. So I have my notepad and my pen ready to go to take notes because I'm excited for today's session as well. And of course, we'll intersperse questions and answers throughout and leave a little time at the end. First question, number one question without fail. Hey guys, is this webinar being recorded? Yes, today's webinar is being recorded, and you will get a link to that link to that recording with the registration email that you use. So if you have to leave a little early, you'll still get to see the whole session. If we go kind of fast, you'll still be able to rewatch that session as well. Based on our registrants today, many of you are considering yourselves video editors, meaning you've made a few videos and you're looking for an expertise level. That's how we're going to target today's session. But don't worry, even if you're still new or exploring Camtasia, we're going to show you a couple quick things that literally take less than 2 or 3 clicks to make a visually stunning presentation. In the bottom of the Zoom webinar interface, there's a Q&A section. We are going to encourage you to put your questions that you hope to get answered in that Q&A section. I can't guarantee we'll get to all of them, and some of them will get to Joe and I to share live, but we have a massive group of TechSmithies here to help us out. We've got Alex and Brooks and Carson and Clint and McKinsey and Melissa and Michael and Robert and 2 Troys. You get 2 Troys today that are here to help you to the best of their ability to answer your questions. They cannot answer all of them, but they're going to answer as many as possible because there's a little over 1,000 of you in today's webinar. So we will do our best. We also have a chat that's open. So the chat is for you to engage with other attendees. We're going to ask that you not put questions in there. Try and keep them in the Q&A, but we'll do our best to cover that. But great place to share information with your fellow attendees. We also have closed captioning available to you, so you can turn on live transcription. It actually does a pretty good job, Joe. It does a really great job of transcribing what we're saying in real time if you find that useful. That being said, Joe, this is where I'm going to stop my screen share. And I'm going to hand the magic wand of the awesomeness that is the Zoom webinar interface over to you, my friend, so that we can learn a little bit more about using Camtasia like a designer without having to be one, because I'm not one. And I'm excited.
Au contraire, first of all, thank you, Jason. But I have to say, I've seen your work, and he has some chops there. He's very, very humble. But I just want to start by just saying thank you. Thanks to JV. Thanks to TechSmith, but especially to all of you for being here today. But from the heart, thank you for bringing us along in your creative journey. I've been a designer most of my life. I started drawing comic books and just never let go of that creative habit. And so I hope today I can show you how I approached video projects inside of Camtasia from a design perspective. both from a UX, which is user experience, making things accessible, but also from a graphic design perspective of just making things irresistible and incredibly engaging. Or we're going to do our best to make it incredibly engaging. So you guys can be the judge. I do want to make a quick note that a lot of the things we're going to cover today, I've made available as assets that you can download and deconstruct, play with, reuse on your own. And we'll share the link in the follow-up email, but I can give it to you now. It's bit.ly/Camtasia Design. And that's going to lead you to a Dropbox link, which will have a template file that you can open inside of Camtasia 2022. And I think you'll enjoy what you'll see in there. And, you know, spoiler alert, a lot of the cool stuff we're going to cover is in there. So enjoy if you want to play along as I sort of walk through some stuff here. So I also want to just make one last note. I also have a key grip behind the camera here. Brooks Andrus, our TPM on Camtasia, he's our product manager, a brilliant mind and a visionary. He's one of my design partners at TechSmith, and so I invited him along for the ride, and occasionally he's going to be shouting over the mic that I'm absolutely welcoming. I want some heckling, I want some reminders about keyboard shortcuts, and also just cool stuff that's inside of Camtasia that I might gloss over. So you've been forewarned. All right, so let's go ahead and start by sharing my screen here. All right, and let's go into Camtasia. Okay, let's go ahead and go full screen. Okay, how are we looking? JV, everybody see my screen?
Yeah, it's looking crisp. And a reminder to everybody, while you're in Zoom, you can drag Joe off to the right a little bit. If you want more screen real estate, you can kind of shrink down his camera. He's in our brand new studio at the brand new TechSmith headquarters, so it's kind of exciting for him. But yeah, your screen looks great, Joe. Go for it.
Awesome. Okay, so I want to start with something that we've all encountered if we're in Camtasia, and that is, you know, the amazing capabilities of the Camtasia Recorder. The Camtasia Recorder not only will capture your screen, but it's going to capture your webcam, your audio from your mic, from your system, and also your cursor. But what I want to do is I want to approach it today from a design perspective. And in design, we talk a lot about, you know, how we lay things out, you know, just how things can be parsed by our viewers, both in the static realm, but also in the video realm. And so I want to just do a real quick treatment on, you know, sort of a, you know, not great recording. Like you could see, I didn't really frame things up very nicely in my webcam. I didn't really frame up my shot, if I'm thinking of it from a camera perspective. Sorry, I'm looking at a camera, so the analog is strong. And so let's go ahead and start by just going and grabbing our cropping tool. So I'm going to have to move my zoom HUD around here, so you'll have to forgive the extra mouse movements. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to select that video on the timeline. So let's go ahead and make this all a little bigger, a little easier to see. And I'm going to go ahead and select the cropping tool. So these are our canvas tools. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten up my focus on the actual screen content. This is a little tutorial I did quickly about adding and removing fonts on macOS Ventura. And so I'm just going to go in, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, we have zoomed controls, and so I'm zooming in and out, and I'm just going to get this sort of tight. And ideally, I would imagine most of you have discovered this cropping capability, but it is super powerful, and I want to just touch it real quick. And now I'm going to do the same thing with my webcam. I'm just going to bring this in, and I kind of picked a funny still frame there. And I'm going to sort of reduce some of the headspace, and I don't really need my thermostat in there, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that in as well. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and move around in my video, and what I'm looking for is basically where am I looking in this presentation. So if I zoom back out, you can see I've got a lot of negative space to play with, but the first thing I want to do is just figure out where should my camera go. In graphic design, we have this notion of, and this is actually an art principle, of the implied line or the psychic line. And that is where if you have an image and in a person, let's say it's a sculpture of David, where David is looking, that's going to direct the viewer's eye to look as well. It just is this sort of natural intuitive thing we do as humans. And so what I'm going to do is, in this case, I had my video camera sort of offset from where I was working. I had a 2-monitor setup, and I like to set up like this just so that I can use this technique. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and move myself. Like first I need to go ahead and switch back to my selection tool. And I'm going to go ahead and move myself off and to the right, and I'm going to try to overlay myself just ever so subtly here. You know, we're just going to work in steps. We're starting slow, and we're going to ramp up. Okay, so now I've got myself in a position where as I scroll ahead, you can see you know, there's portions of the video where I'm going to look at the camera, and that's sort of a prompt, like in the beginning, prompt to the viewer, like I'm talking directly to you. And then I'm going to go back into, you know, actually operating the machine. And so now I'm going to start just bringing things up. I've got all this space. So let's go ahead and tuck closed our media bin. And many of you may not know, you can also, if you want, you can also hide the labels for our tool panel too. So now you have maximum real estate to work with. And heck, why not even hide the properties panel? Now I'm just focused on the canvas and the timeline. All right, so I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. And let's go ahead and, apologize for the jerky motion there. I'm just going to go ahead and make this bigger, and I'm just going to fill the space. Now your temptation might be just like totally fill the whole window. And there is certainly a time and a place to do it, and I do it all the time. I'll set a layout like this. But this one, I actually want to sort of use the fact that this very much feels like a window. I'm going to use that to my advantage here, and I'm going to kind of lay this out so that I have equal negative space on both sides. Top and bottom, and then why not even on the right? Like have that just roughly equal. Doesn't have to be precise, but you can see if I look at the top of my canvas, here, let me try to line it up, trying to do this one-handed.
Good God, option 0, my man.
Yeah, option 0. See, thank you. This is already providing value, having a key grip.
I don't know. Did he bring you coffee of any kind?
I don't see any coffee. What gives over here, Brooks? But I'll take that shortcut. Okay, so I'm zoomed in at 100%. This is my actual size, and you should know that shortcut. And I say that, you know, as a hypocrite. I should know that shortcut. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and get this equal space. Now, webcam. My webcam is kind of ridiculously small here. I mean, there's times where you just want to tuck yourself away. Maybe you just, you know, feel a little shy about it, but this is your authentic connection. This is your voice to the viewer. You're their Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're their Sherpa. You're guiding them. So why not make yourself just a little bigger here? I'm just going to go ahead and enlarge. You know, I'm going to go past my comfort zone. I'm going to actually go up to like 60%. All right. So when I get to precision like that, looks like I dialed it in with the canvas controls, but like I can enter the scale here. I could say, you know, let's go to 100%. And I'd say that's, you know, actually I'm not even too put off by that, but I'm going to go back down to 60%. And let's take a look at what our screen recording is. Okay, screen recording is at 71%. I'll go ahead and just bump it down to 70%. Okay, so looking pretty good so far, but there's just some missing touches. Like, first of all, I've got these hard edges. You know, if you think about what hard edges represent psychologically, it's like sharp, spiny teeth. You know, I picture like a T-Rex mouth. Let's go ahead and bring some of those edges down a bit, make this feel a little bit more approachable with the corner rounding effect. So I'm going to open up the visual effects bin. And this is, by the way, my favorite bin, you know, other than the library. And I like favorites. And I'm a big fan of animations too, but I'd have to say visual effects still takes it for me. We're going to go ahead and work over to corner rounding. So you can see I've got this corner rounding effect, and I'm just going to apply it to both. So I'm just going to select both of my media. You can see I'm just doing a click and drag. And I'm going to do a right click, add to selected media, and now I have the corner rounding effect. You can see it popped up right in the properties panel. And I'm just going to move that up until I get to a place where I start to feel like this is almost like a card, you know, like a trading card. Let's see. So if I go to 70% or so, that's looking pretty good. Now, if you look at the Mac OS window in the background, you might say, oh, it looks a little bit, it doesn't really fit in the Mac aesthetic. And I totally accept that argument. And so we can bring that down maybe to, let's bring it down to like say 40. All right. So, but I do want to keep this round. In fact, I think I need to go further with my webcam. I think I'll go 120 on the radius. And I think I can actually go more. I'm going to go to like 180. And I'm just looking to get a nice rounded finish on that just looks really approachable and polished. Okay, so now let's just take a look at where we're at just from a layout standpoint. If I kind of look at where I'm at in the frame compared to the actual screen content, I am kind of running into the actual content itself. And you can make that stylistic decision to say, no, I want it to really be a hard overlap. Like, so in this case, you know, I'm going to just overlap that content, and sometimes the cursor will disappear, and that's okay. Other times you might want to be a little bit more conscientious and sort of make a little bit more room. Like in this video, if I hide my webcam, like I have a lot of dead space right here that I can use. So I'm just going to use that space for now. Okay, so I lost some of those margins. Now, if you look at the top, let's zoom in a little bit. If I look at the top, and then I look down at the bottom, like I want those to be pretty even. And then the same thing on the right, if my screen is about yay far, I'm just kind of eyeballing this. I'm just going to move this in just like so. Okay, a little too far. And you can hold shift and arrow if you want to go by, I think, tens. Is it tens or fives, Brooks?
Tens.
Tens. Okay, so here we go. Okay, now let's go ahead and center this back up. Now, I think we're ready to actually start adding some polish. Now, I want to emphasize that this is our most simple demo that I can give that shows how powerful the design capabilities are in Camtasia. Camtasia 2022 comes with a new library. I'm going to go ahead and navigate over to that, and I'm inside of the Camtasia 22 library, which is the default at the top. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll down, and I'm going to go to the fills and overlays category. All right, now these have some magic to them. So let's go ahead and twirl open one of these here. How about duotone gradients? Let's twirl that open. And you can see I have these really beautiful gradients. But it's not just that. There's also a little bit of a superpower in these gradients. And it's in our title of our webinar, blend modes. They have blend modes attached to them. And so all I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this top one, duotone gradient 1. I'm going to add it to timeline at playhead. And just like that, like I have a really cool polished look. Like, look at how surprised I am. And so if I go ahead and scroll forward, I'm just going to stretch this out. And let's go ahead and just make sure everything is even Steven here. I'm just going to make sure that clip is pulled in. And so if I just scroll ahead, you can see this is like a pretty nice look. It's laying over the top of both the webcam and the screen video, and it's totally customizable, right? I can go in and I can say, you know, I actually want this to be my Camtasia theme. And just like that, I've got gamma radiation, and I'm a little bit hulky, but I'm going to go ahead and undo that. It's totally themable though. And in this case, you can already see that there's an effect that I need to leverage this in the Camtasia tool stack here. And that is a color adjustment. So I look a little bit like I have a little bit of a contrast brightness issue on my webcam. So I'm going to go over to my visual effects, and I'm going to grab the color adjustment. I'm just going to drag it down. And right away, it looks like an extreme result. Like, that's not what I wanted at all. I mean, you could have wanted that. It's kind of stylistic. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zero out my values. So brightness at 0, contrast at 0, and then saturation, 0. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start fiddling a bit with these sliders. So I'm going to bring the brightness up. I'm going to bring the contrast up a bit. I'm going to bring the saturation down ever so slightly. And I'm just playing with these values until I get something that looks refined, right? And so there I can see I've landed a pretty decent look. And so just like that, I have this really nice looking layout. And I just had to use a couple clicks there. That was nothing fancy. Hopefully that's not, I'm not going too fast or it's not overwhelming. But now I want to talk about another principle. And that is a graphic design art principle. We're going to talk about proportions. And I just want to make it really simple. We're going to make one of these elements a large. I think you know what it is. We're going to make one of these elements a medium. So think t-shirt sizes. And then we're going to make another element, an important element, you could argue a critical element, a small. We're going to do that because it's going to create this sense of hierarchy, and you're going to see a pretty interesting result. And so I already have established that I've got my screen is looking like the large. I think that's appropriate. That content is really what the viewer is most interested in. I'm guiding them through a process. And I've got my webcam, the medium, but what's the small? JV, do you want to take a guess at what the small is here?
I don't, because I'm going to be really, really wrong.
Okay, but then I'm going to go ahead and answer this one. It's
Please.
the mouse cursor, and it's the mighty mouse. It is not by any means small in the diminutive sense. It's got an important job, and in Camtasia, we think of the mouse as the hero. It's your guide. You know, you think about cooking videos, you think about craftsman videos. What's that key shot when you're actually learning how to assemble or mix the ingredients? It's that close-up of the hands. And in the digital world, your mouse cursor is that tight shot on the actual kinetic motion, the thing you're trying to learn. So we're going to go ahead and lean in on that. I'm actually going to make this a lot bigger. In Camtasia, we replace all the cursors with vector replacements. And so you can make it huge if you wanted to. And you can see here, like now it's sort of rivaling my webcam. So now I would have like proportionally 2 mediums and a large. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it down. Let's just bring it down to say 1,000. And already that looks pretty darn nice. And I'm going to go ahead and do one more thing, and that is you can see on my timeline, let's see if I can zoom in and just so you can get a better look. If you look at my actual screen recording, which is track 1, I've got these little images on the timeline with little mouse pointers on them. It's a little hard to see, but what this is indicating is anytime a mouse cursor image changes. And so as I just scroll through, you can see there's all these different cursors. Some of them are cropped off, and that's, you know, totally fine. But I just want to go ahead and clean that up. Like here's one where you can see, I don't really need to show my end viewer this little, east-west bar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I have my replace cursor image little dialog open. I'm just going to twirl it open, and I'm going to switch over to all. And I'm just going to go over to the Mac system cursors and just select this nice pointy finger. You know, it looks like the white glove treatment here. And now it's replaced all the cursors in this recording with this really tasteful looking, iconic mouse icon image. Okay, so if I go through, that's looking pretty good. Now I look at this proportionally though, and let's just do one quick measurement here. And that is, if I grab over to the annotations bin, which is right below the library, I'm going to go up to the tab bar. I'm going to select the shapes category, and I'm just going to grab just one of these shapes because this is just going to be my spacer. This is just going to help me assess how my proportions are actually working when I start to draw some boxes around things. So if I bring this box and I say, show me what real estate you're sort of holding there, it's about that big. So then if I bring it over to my webcam and I do an option click drag, you can see that it is roughly half the webcam, but I think this is telling me that I can make it bigger. So I'm going to go back in and let's go ahead and select, and let's see, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out of my timeline a little bit so everybody can see what I'm doing. Let me move my timeline up just a smidge. And so I'm just going to go ahead and select that bottom T-Rec again. And now I'm just going to move over to the mouse tab, the little pointer tab you'll see over here, cursor properties, in the properties panel. And that's where all this magic is housed. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to enlarge this just so, you know, it looks like I'm just hovering around 1200 or so. And I'd say I might have went a little far, but like this is okay. So now proportionally, I've got this mouse cursor half the size of my webcam area, okay? So now there's just one last thing that I want to do in terms of visual treatment here, and that is I want to add a drop shadow. I want to have some depth, okay? So let's go ahead and go back over to our visual effects, and I'm going to scroll down to my drop shadow, and let's just go ahead and select both the webcam and the T-Rec. I don't have to worry about the cursor. That just comes with the T-Rec, the Camtasia recording file. Okay, so I'm just going to move this drop shadow down, click and drag, and release. And by default, it looks pretty tasteful. I'd say that we can really lean in on this. So I'm going to select the webcam, and again, scroll down. And you know, you can see it, my properties here are already starting to get a little long in terms of scroll. So if you want to start twirling some things closed, like I'm not going to be messing with the corner rounding again. I'm not going to be messing with the color adjustment again. I'm just double clicking on the header, and that slides everything closed. Okay, so now I'm going to move my offset out on my drop shadow, and I'm going to move my blur so I get a little bit more of a fall off, and I'm going to increase opacity ever so slightly, not too much. Now you see this and you might say like, okay, yeah, that looks cool, but it looks a little off to me. And the reason it looks off is because we're indicating a light source here. So when you're thinking about, you know, if you were looking at, oh, look at me, I have, you know, 2 light sources that are sort of filling my face up. If I were to turn one of those lights off, you'd see all the light on this side and you'd see shadow on this side. And this is sort of implying the details of my face. We want to use that same principle here. Just so that we have like this really refined look. And so I'm going to grab a hold of my webcam, and I'm going to go ahead and move this shadow to the lower left. So now it's as if the light is hitting, and if you're looking at my little dialogue here, the light is hitting this corner, and the shadow casts over to the opposite corner. Okay, and so in this case, you can see the light source is this yellow area, right? And so it's, you know, technically that's not very yellow, but I'm going to go ahead and move that offset even more. I'm just going to pretend like this is a really strong shadow. And I think I'm going to do the same thing on the T-Rec. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And again, same thing, move it over to that corner so it's that strong insinuation of light source. And in this case, I don't think I'm going to make the offset as far because I'm going to pretend like, hey, this is closer to the surface. And so I'm going to go ahead and leave that sort of where it is. I'm going to still have a bit of a blur, but like when something gets close to a surface, the blur reduces, right? And so if this was just over the surface, and this may be hard to see. Let's see, let me zoom in a little bit. If I was just over the surface, this is sort of the look you would get. If I'm just gonna lift off just ever so slightly, you know, that's a look, that's like a strong light overhead in that corner. But now because this light is sort of more omnipresent in that corner, I'm gonna go ahead and have it fall off. And so as it falls off, you can see I've about dialed it in. Okay. And so there is my first set of visual sort of treatments here, okay? JV, how are we doing? Am I moving too fast or am I going too slow? What's the feedback?
I think the general response is yes and yes. So there, a lot of people are gaining knowledge here. We've actually got some questions that have come in that would correspond to what you've talked about so far, Joe. So I'm going to pepper you with a couple, and then we'll keep going because we're almost halfway through our time already. That's how quickly this goes, right?
Oh boy.
So you mentioned, and Brooks mentioned the Option 0, Control 0. People are just curious. That keyboard shortcut is to scale the screen back to 100%.
Correct. That's Option Z or Alt Z on Windows. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't think Windows has them yet.
Okay, so this is on our backlog for Windows, but on the Mac, I'm on the Mac right now. So if you're in Camtasia Mac 2022, I'm in 2022.4. Then Option Z, 100% scaling. Super handy. I feel ashamed of myself that I had to be reminded of that.
No, it's one of those things that if you use it, it's just muscle memory. If you don't use it, it's good to know about.
Absolutely.
Quick question around the drop shadow you were just talking about that people hadn't noticed that before. Over in the properties panel, can you delete it and re-add it? Can you talk about that toggle switch? Just the ability for people to experiment with it without having to like commit to it, so to speak.
Oh, this is like the best. I'm so glad you mentioned this, JV. Great question. Yeah, the toggle is really your sort of creative best friend. It just gives you this ability to gut check, right? And so, you know, if I'm zooming in and I'm just trying to evaluate like, okay, this is the detail view. And then when I do my Option Z and I get back to this full view, and this is when I can turn it off and on and just say, is it working? You know, and like stylistically, you may decide that shadows are not for you and you really want to go for those clean, crisp edges. That's awesome. That's totally a look I like to go for too. So yeah, you can turn it off and you can leave it there. So you can change your mind. Like you could twirl it closed and you could come back to this project or hand this project on to a colleague and they could come in and say, you know what, actually, what was he doing there? And I kind of liked that.
Cool.
Total flexibility.
Cool. I'm going to go with two more questions for right now and then go back into the content. One's real easy. Person was asking, you know what, I have a call out that I've customized and I've added it to my library. How do I add it to my favorites? Because they don't like to go through all the clicks it takes to get it out of their library. So if you could just show someone real quickly how to add something to their favorites menu.
That's very cool. Great question. And also that's a feature request that I share with you. So I'm really glad you bring it up here. Currently, we don't allow you to favorite library assets in such a way that they will populate under the media bin. However, anything you see sans the library, sans the media bin, anything that you see below here that's in effect can be favorited. So I can go in, let's go over to behaviors, for instance. Like I really like this fade behavior. I can select it, click the star. And if I go back over to this favorites menu, you can see I've got this, you know, set of behaviors. I've got some sets of custom animations. I've got my cursor path creator. I've got my audio effects. Pretty much everything that I just need at my fingertips, I can just live in this bin and not have to go hunting around all the various tool bins that Camtasia has. Great question, and the feature request is totally heard.
Cool. And the last question we're going to do for right now, and then we'll get back into it. Shauna was asking, do you and this is actually a question I will ask as well. Do you recommend corner rounding on all videos, and or when is the best time to use this effect?
Great point. Yeah, I do use it quite a bit, to be honest with you.
It's a signature
you know,
piece
there's
of Joe's.
certainly a time and a place. Pardon me, Jason?
No, it's a signature of yours. Like it's always that. I always just think it's like this, even on the screen recording there, it's just so subtle with the offset of the it's just, I don't know, it's visually stunning to me. And I know it took you like a half of a second to apply.
Well, that's why it's such a cool effect, because the simplicity really just seems to strengthen why it is such a cool one to use, because it is deceptively simple, but visually does add a lot of refinement. And I think there are some basic, just psychological principles. And like I alluded to, with sharp edges sort of evoke a certain response in your brain, and it's subconscious. By no means am I an expert in that field. But when you start to ease off the edges, things just start to look, well, smoother.
I think smooth is a good way to go with it. So we'll keep collecting questions for you, Joe. Just a reminder to everybody to go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A section. If they get in the chat, we might not get to them, but we're trying our best. We've already answered well over 100 questions. So Joe, let's go to the next part of your presentation.
Awesome. Well, before we put this one to rest, I just want to go ahead and show one more element of the library that I think is super powerful. And this came in Camtasia 2022. It's called our emphasis effects. And so there's a couple moments in here where I am going to click in this video. Now I could add a click effect, which is going to look really cool. But in this case, like there's really just this moment. Let's see, I'm about to approach it. Boom, there it is. I really want to make this a little bit more obvious to my viewer. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to my emphasis effects. And I've got this whole slew of things I can choose from. I'm going to go into bursts and collapses. And you can see, look at all of these effects. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just twirl some open until I find the one that I'm interested in. Like you can see, here's some rings. And I'm going to go ahead and grab this. Well, let's see, purple would probably look really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to timeline. And it's just asking me about frame rates. You can just hit continue. And right away, you can see I've got this. Let me just try to preview this so you can see it. Whoops, let me mute my audio real quick. Let's see, I'm just going to bring my gain down. This is a pro tip. If you click this little view meter on the upper right of your timeline, you can actually control the project gain. So I'm going to close that again. And so I get a little collapse effect there. So this is like anticipatory. This little collapse effect tells the viewer, hey, something's coming. So let me go ahead and zoom in. And I'm going to go ahead and let's see, right before that clicks, that's just about, once it gets into view. Okay, right there. I just want to tell the viewer, like there's something that's about to happen over in this area. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to twirl this closed. And let's go ahead and just see what that does right away. Boom. So right as, I can actually move it back a little bit so it starts a little sooner. So it's just telling the viewer, here's where something's going to happen, and then the click happens. And so now I'm just going to add a burst. Okay, so in this case, let's see, I'm kind of persnickety about what effects I use here. I'm going to go ahead and grab this one. And in fact, you can see that's really, really quite nice. And in this case, I think I'll use this gold just to echo that sun source that we talked about in the upper right corner there. And so now this is going to be positioned. I want to move that right over. And so I just want to really quickly show you. Let's just hit Option Z, and let's just go ahead and play this back. And boom. Okay, a little late, and so I'm going to have to use another track, which is no problem. And I'm going to move this over here, and there's that click, and I was a little off on the click. Now you might be saying, well, isn't it sad that it's covering up the little pointer? I think it is, and so there's a way really quickly around this. I'm going to go over to my visual effects, and I'm just going to add a blend mode to both of these. And blend mode effect is a powerful new effect we added in Camtasia 2022. It's amazing all the things you can do with it, but right away you can see things are starting to, as you would expect, blend in. And so I'm actually going to just set this to normal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to crack open this range slider here. So I've got this little advanced control on the range row. I open this up, and what this allows me to do is trim away colors I don't want to show up. So like that one I don't want to mess with. But if I just trim this away, I can just make it a little less of a fully covered thing. And so now if I move in and I play back, you can see it's now like able to blend really nicely with that finger and not cover anything up. Okay, so let's just one more time watch the whole thing at a reasonable zoom level, and you get a sense of how powerful these are.
I gotta tell you, Joe. So I'm on the customer education team here at TechSmith. Our job is to make tutorials to teach you how to use Camtasia, Snagit, and our other products. And we always have we always had to bring in a fake cursor and bring it in and animate a click state. And now with the combination of the new replaced cursor with those beautiful vector graphics where we can expand the size and not worry about it, and then those bursts and those click effects, I've shaved so much time off with the same intensity of showing where an action is happening versus having to guess. And it's literally a click and drag. And I am not kidding you. Any of the new tutorials you'll see, At least the ones that I've created will have these kinds of effects in it because of that hero you're talking about. It's focusing on that cursor.
Absolutely. I love it. I know I use it a lot. In fact, I actually have a project, unless we're at a point now, JV, that you would like to take some additional questions, I can go ahead and start us on another direction here.
Let's go with continuing on. I think the questions that are coming in, the team is still handling, but if they get specific around what you're doing, I will I'll interrupt.
Very cool. Okay, so I'm just going to switch over to this project I made for the Camtasia 2022 release, just to give you a sense of just the capabilities of Camtasia. Like from a designer perspective, I have total control over how my mouse moves, how that cursor, how smooth it is, what the clicks look like, what the interactions look like, but also zooming in tight to the shot for my viewer. That's something we haven't really addressed yet, which is you can go really close in to help your viewer really know, okay, this is the part of the screen I really want you to focus on right now. So I just want you to get a sense of how I'm using click effects and zoom together here with a very smooth cursor path. And then we'll move over to a typography example. So you can see I have that nice smooth cursor, and then I punch in tight. Now I'm at 100%. And look at those smooth pans, smooth cursor movement. Again, I have not only an anticipatory click effect, but then also that ring that follows. And
Joe,
yes,
I know I'm going to get questions about this. If you go scroll back a little bit on there, the blurriness, the motion blurring that's happening. Can you just address that for a quick second? Because this was something I never thought I needed in my life, and now I need it on all my videos.
Discerning eye, JV. So let's go ahead and select this, and you can see that this is another extremely simple effect. So much so that you'll forget. Like I even forgot we had it on, but holy moly, does it make a difference? This is in the visual effects bin, and if I scroll down, you'll see we have this little motion blur. So I'll just go ahead and let it preview. You can get a little sense of how it looks with like the Camtasia logo. Very nice polish it adds to insinuate motion, insinuate camera movement in the physical plane, which is something that really goes a long ways when you're talking about the flat two-dimensional surface of a screen. So I use motion blur almost on everything, and you can see like at this still frame, it looks like an action shot, you know, and all I had to do was add the effect. I just drag it to the media. The property shows up in the properties panel. I can mess with the amount I want the blur to be. And in this case, I'm going to undo it because I had it just right. And so then I'm going to just go ahead and play it back. And you can see there's all kinds of these, just that subtle motion blur. We have some really brilliant minds around us here at TechSmith, JV. And this one is beyond my capacity of understanding to know how they were able to figure out how to blur those cursors and insinuate.
That's fair. That's totally fair. Just take the magic and use it.
Absolutely. Now, I thought it might be interesting also, just real quick, just to touch on how I was able to make this cursor path so smooth. We have this ability in Camtasia to go in, and if I dig in enough to my layers, I apologize. I didn't anticipate you guys actually seeing this project up close, but I'm actually a bit of a messy editor. And so I'm going to go ahead and go in and edit my cursor path here. And so I found where I had added a cursor path to this video. And you can see now I entered the path editing mode. So edit cursor path. And now I've got all these controls that pop up and some additional options inside of the cursor tab, the cursor properties of the properties panel. And so I'm going to go ahead and close some bins so you guys can see what I'm doing. But you can see now I have these little control points. And what this allows me to do is change my performance. In this case, I had already changed it so that I didn't cover the labels. I didn't want my mouse pointer to cover what the new project and new from template button was. And I also wanted to make sure that it was timed right so that it hovered correctly on the buttons. And I wanted this to be precise. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. There's a question that just came in and I knew this was going to happen. The cursor adjustments that you're making right now are only available for content that was recorded with Camtasia, right? So we capture all that magic metadata that's around the cursor itself. I can't ingest a piece of recording from someone else. It has to have been captured by Camtasia.
That is correct if you want to have a performance editable, but we do have another feature in Camtasia that I use a lot. In fact, I might have the project open. I don't have the
Don't even
project.
worry about it. Don't even worry about it right now. If we have time, we'll get to it. Basically, Joe's telling you you can add a cursor path to a recording that wasn't made with Camtasia.
And it's super awesome. You can grab a bunch of screenshots, string them together, group them, throw the cursor path creator on, and you can literally just make the performance without ever hitting the record button. Super powerful, super flexible. One of the great features of Camtasia. All right, so I just wanted to share just a little bit of how cursor path editing works. I can also do things in this mode where I can change the cursor image. Like let's say I wanted it to be Mac cursors. And again, like I can go through cursor by cursor and I could just say, okay, that should be the Mac pointer. Let's make it larger. And I can go to the next cursor. In this case, that should be the Mac pointer finger. And I'm just gonna work through and just turn this into a Mac presentation. Right? And so I was able to do that with total flexibility in Camtasia because these things aren't baked in, right? They're all dynamic. They're all loaded as a separate character, so to speak, or a separate type of footage on your media. All right, so are we, do we have any other questions, JV, or should we pivot to a typographic sort of topic?
So there are questions about changing shapes and stuff like that we'll address separately. Can you explain real quick for Robin? She's asking, how is cursor path editing, which you're showing right here, different from cursor smoothing, which we've had in the product for a little while?
That's a good question. I know that, so cursor path editing is about total control. You do get cursor smoothing for free with it, just based on the fact that we turn all those points where that cursor was over time into a nice smooth Bezier curve. However, the difference between cursor smoothing and this is that you have total control of where that cursor is. You can add new points, you can change the curve type, and this just all lends to an extra dimension of performance. And so the difference really is the aspect of control. Great question, Robin.
Past that, I think we can move on to the next part. Just doing a quick time check for you. We've got about 16 or 17 minutes overall in today's presentation time.
Wow, I really cannot believe that. So I actually have like 4 other exercises ready for us. Fortunately, if you go, I mentioned at the beginning of the hour here, if you go to bit.ly/Camtasia Design, bit.ly/Camtasia Design, that will lead you to a Dropbox link with all of the assets that I'm showing in this video. And there's some really cool stuff for you to check out, deconstruct, and it's actually super easy to customize. So be sure you check out that link after the recording or now while we go on to the next topic here, because one of the main topics of design that I think is really powerful in video is typography. In fact, it's a whole discipline. Typography is a whole separate of design, even though there's this sort of natural overlap. So much so that I still feel very much like a newbie, but I did want to just kind of get into a little bit of how in Camtasia we can make really powerful titles, and let's see how far we can get. And I'll try not to rush this, but I also will try not to drag it on. So first I'm just going to start by going over to my annotations bin, and I'm just going to locate just a little text box here. I don't want any of the extra shapes. And I'm just going to go ahead and pull this full width. And what we're looking to do with this typeface is we want, first of all, we're going to think, what is our message and what should the typeface be to really help accentuate that message, okay? So in this case, I think the message, and we like to talk about this on Camtasia, I'm going to go all caps, so I hit the caps lock key. Really, it's about elevated or being elevated in design. So we're just going to say elevate. And I'm going to go ahead and select this. I've got Montserrat or Montserrat. We were debating on how that's actually pronounced. You can send me an email and let me know. But we're going to go ahead and use this typeface just for the sake of simplicity. It's our default typeface. I'm going to go ahead and go just right up to like extra bold. Now in this case, you might say, well, when I think of elevate, I don't think a heavy and impactful. Yeah, that's a great point. So maybe I would go instead for a light. So I go light. Now all of a sudden it's sort of breathing and you can kind of see there's air. And those letters are a little tight together. So I'm just going to go ahead and spread them out with some H spacing. And you can see like, oh, the further I go, it almost looks like it's elevating. It's elevating in the sort of X direction, but like it's kind of helping, right? This is what, these sort of letter spacing, kerning, or it's technically tracking, is just sort of adding some extra space to what's already coded into those letter forms. And so that looks pretty nice, but I want to go ahead and go bigger. This is going to be a bigger title. So I'm just going to increase that size. Now you might get to the point where you actually reach the max of the slider. That doesn't mean that you can't go higher. In Camtasia, we try to reduce or try to eliminate any barriers for you being able to get what you need out of a look. So I'm going to see if I can punch this up to like 299, and that's pretty good. Okay, so that's already pretty nice. Now, when I'm thinking about elevating, would it make sense to have elevate down at the bottom, Jason?
Well, I mean, elevate means to rise, unless you're going to animate. I mean, oh my gosh. See, this is the design questions I can't answer, Joe, because I would probably put it in the upper third myself.
Oh, what a great boy. It's like we planned this, and we actually did not plan this. But yeah, so we're going to do that. We're going to use the rule of thirds here. So you've probably heard of the rule of thirds. It's really, I mean, if you have a mobile phone with a camera on it, you'll see the rule of thirds typically by default as a grid. It's super handy. I'm just going to, I know I have a 1920 canvas, so that means I'm going to go over to my properties of this box, and I'm going to just say 640. And what I'm going to do is, let's see, yep, okay. Take this down. I shouldn't have locked it. Let's see. Here we go. And whoops. Okay, so I'm just going to get this. I'm kind of roughing it a little bit. I don't want to show you guys just how obsessed I am with things being perfectly aligned. And I'm just going to group that, just get that so. And then I'm just going to do an Option, Shift, Drag. So the Option duplicates as I drag, and the Shift constrains it to the X. So I don't have to like worry about it leaving that sort of right position I have there of being perfectly aligned. Then I go all the way across. Okay. And so now I'm just going to select those. I'm just going to increase it ever so slightly. Okay. So now I have thirds. And so like Jason said, like, let's go ahead and move this. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and show you a pro tip. I can take this track and I can move it all the way up to the top. And I'm just going to move this all the way up to that top third there. And I'm just going to line it right in that sort of like, I'm not even going to use it as a baseline. Like a baseline would be that those letters would sit on it, right? I'm actually just going to split it because we're giving that insinuation of rising, right? So now I'm just going to hide those thirds. Okay, so now I have this typeface. I think we could do a cool animation on it. How about we grab a behavior? So I'm going to move over to the behaviors bin. And in this case, like what are we looking at? Like how about we grab drifting? So I'm going to just go and add drifting to this. Let's see if I just try the right click. And let's just see what this looks like. Okay, it elevates. It looks pretty cool. All right, does that look about right, JV?
Yeah, it's not bad. Not bad.
Okay. I think we could do better. Let's see, what can we do? Let's take direction. Let's see what it looks like if it elevates from the top. Okay, it looks like it's falling, right?
I'm just going to put this out there. We've got like 30 responses in a row. Hey, why don't we add a grid overlay to Camtasia? Brooks, are you listening?
Grid overlay, Brooks. Oh yeah, we totally want it. Absolutely. Well, you know, Tuesday we shipped on Windows 22.3 a rulers and guides feature that would be just perfect for just creating your own grids. And then eventually, yes, we absolutely want baked in grids. Okay, so now I'm just going to go back over to my fills and overlays, and I'm going to go over to Neon Motion this time. So we actually have some animated fills and overlays too. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add a track. And let's go ahead and let's see. How about we just go with Camtasia? Because we're talking about Camtasia, elevating Camtasia design. And I'm going to go ahead and add that to Playhead. And let's just go ahead and take a look what we get just out of the box. Okay, so that's looking pretty cool. I mean, I could live with that, but I really want like something that's a little bit more impactful. And so in this case, I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring in my tracking a little bit. So the H spacing in Camtasia, I'm going to bring this in. Let me see if I can get this to go larger. I'm just going to go up, 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 hold my shift, and I'm just going to make this larger with a little less. I just want this to be a little bit more impactful. Make sure I'm still good there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what a complementary color would be because I want some contrast. You can see the white gets lost against this really bright green. So this is where we can start talking about contrast in color. This is actually a super fun area, and I think if I move my screen around, many apologies, I have got a number of things open. And let me just move my HUD out of the way. is if I go to color.adobe.com, we've got a nice color wheel here. And we can kind of look and say like, okay, and it doesn't really matter what you select here, although if I select complementary, it does make it a little easier. And I want my values, let's see, I want my values to be high. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select that green. So I'm going to move this over to the green. And I'm going to get to that area where I get to about the green that I have dialed in. And you can see what it's recommending is complementary. It's sort of like cranberry-ish color here. And this is not a hard rule. Like you can totally mess with this and play with it until it feels about right. But we'll go ahead and grab, let's see, how about we grab this one right here? So we'll grab this hex code, this DE64A, and I'll go back to Camtasia. And I'm going to go ahead and open up the colors. And you can see by default, we select the hex code and we can just enter it in. And if I zoom in, you can see now, like I get a pretty nice look. It's still, I would say, it's a little bit hard to read. These lines are sort of competing. Yeah. So there's a contrast issue, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and bump this up. Let's go to medium. Well, let's see, I'm starting to lose it now. Go to bold. And I'll tell you what, maybe in this example, I need a different typeface. So let's go ahead and look around. Like maybe I'll look at Noto Sans and let's open that up and just see what we can get. Or that's kind of interesting. It's kind of got some dynamic motion. What if we go over to, let's see, how about Didot or Dido? Let me see if I can find that one. I want a serif font. Okay.
Yeah, you're basically giving it personality is the way I view it, right?
Absolutely.
You're giving it personality, and it's like, yeah.
So here's a really elegant look. Now, Didot or Dido, again, I never really remember all the pronunciations, has this beautiful italic set. And so I really like that. Like stylistically, like it's all starting to work. And what I could do is I can actually bring down like this sort of neon motion. I could say, I just want the intensity to go down a little bit. I can bring the opacity down a little bit, like if I want it to be less competing. And let's just go ahead and see what we have so far. All right, so I'd say that's pretty good, okay? So what I really want to just show here is that you have a lot of abilities just using an asset from the library to accentuate something with type. So with basic typeface, a behavior, and a library asset, you have a look, all right? And so we also are touching a little bit on how you create these sort of pleasant color combinations, right? Okay, so now I want to move over to a whole other example. JV, I know we're running out of time. So I think I'm going to start at an end result. Okay, so if that sounds fair.
Yeah. We'll show what's possible, and then I've got a series of questions before we wrap up today's session. We already know, Joe, we're going to have to do this again. There's people that are wishing we were not ending at an hour, so we'll take that into consideration.
Well, I apologize. I was being very verbose on our first section, so lesson learned.
No, not at all.
All right, so here's the pack that you all will get if you go to bit.ly/Camtasia Design. You can see I've got this really nice behavior, and I just pulled this together right before our webinar started. So this was nothing hard to do, but look at that beautiful animation that just comes for free in Camtasia. You could just apply this drag and drop. But what I really want to talk about is how we're applying hierarchy with type. So we talk about contrast using color, and we talked about like capturing the personality of the font. But you can also imply hierarchy, or what is the most important thing in terms of the viewer parsing something. This is really like where you start to go from design into accessibility, where you're making things easier to read, you're making things clearer so that you can see what it means at a glance, right? So I'm just going to close some things here. What I've done in this asset is let me just go ahead and open this group up. I'm going to solo. Here's a pro tip. I'm going to go ahead. I have this asset on track 2. I'm going to do an option click on the visibility indicator here. So option click, and that's going to solo it. And what I've done is I have this little wavy line asset. All right. So I made this, actually I made this asset in After Effects. But you can see in the middle of it, I have this nice, like tasteful blurred box. I'm going to go ahead and delete it for now, just like so. Boom, easy to do. And then I'm going to go back into visual effects, and this is called our blur region effect. And by default, it just works beautifully. I'm going to drag it on, and then in this case, like I can adjust the blur, so I can reduce the blur so you can see some of those wavy lines. Look at how smooth that is. You get so much gradation in there. I can increase the color to it. So I could say, actually, I kind of want it to be yellow, or I want it to be green. In this case, I think I like the white, but you can make it a tint of any kind and then adjust the opacity. You can adjust the corner rounding, and you can also make it so it really gets fuzzy, which is kind of an interesting look if you're wanting to experiment. All right, so let's go ahead and reset that. And so let's unsolo this. So I go Option, click the visibility, and now you can see, well, I didn't quite put it in the right position, and I'm going to go ahead and move this in, and it's just enclosing my typographic treatment. All right, so in this case, though, what I want to talk about is we basically stayed in the default font here. This is just Montserrat or Montserrat, and I have an all caps shortcut. That's all I'm calling out. This is a shortcut, and I sized it at 96. And then I have this bar, just this line, which you can find if you navigate over to the annotations. You've got this little line. You can just add lines freely. They're very easy to add and manipulate. And then I've got 100% zoom. And so the first one is set in bold, but then the sort of the title, the subtitle is set in thin, right? And you can see that right here. So you think, what's the opposite of bold? It's like thin or light. And then if I go to this next line, which is more of like the description text, I set it in medium. And lastly, and I'm going to go ahead and adjust this. It looks like I messed it up. I set Montserrat back in bold, which is just anchoring back to what that title did. But what I want to talk about a little bit here is it just tells you sort of at a glance how I kind of want you to parse this information. Shortcut and Option 0 are kind of crying out as important. 100% zoom is stylistic. Like you could even argue that it should be bigger, like so. And then obviously the description, I just want the description to be legible. Now in this case, how I was able to arrive on a look that has a little bit of a flow to it, it's not rocket science. I'm actually just trying to create rhythm with equal distribution or equal spacing across these elements. And so how I was able to do that is just using a spacer. I'm just using what's called the cap height in an all cap treatment here. And you may have heard of X height. If you had a lowercase word form here, you would have an X height. It would literally be the letter X is the height that is defined in a typeface for X height. And so I just grabbed this, and I got this little spacer here, and now I can just move this spacer around. And you can see the cap height here is the same distance I have between shortcut and the subtitle here. And so if I move that down again, you can see that, oops, I've broken my rule. I've broken this in a way that I need to kind of fix. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this down. And then again, these two things are related. So quickly zoom into your canvas at actual size. Here I can actually do an X height measure. So I take my little measurement annotation and I just go to the height of a lowercase letter, and that should be the space between the baseline and the next little part of the description. Because those two are related, I want to keep them as close together as possible without making them too crammed. JV, I heard you for a second.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm only going to interject for just a second because some people are going to probably drop off. So let me give a quick public service announcement. When you need to leave this webinar and you close out, you are going to be presented with a 4-question, less than 1 minute survey. We appreciate you taking the time to put your responses into that because that's how we build webinars like this. This is how I came up with the idea to have Joe on, and now I know it was a great idea. So that we're going to do this more. So just to put that out there, we'll stay on here for a couple more minutes if Joe's got time.
I do.
There's a couple of
I would love to
questions we want to ask, but just want to put it out there. Like, we appreciate you being here. The link to that survey will happen right when you close Zoom. But there's a couple of questions we were hoping to answer. If you have a second, Joe.
Absolutely.
So right away, the one question that came in is, how did you get the rounding edges on that blur effect? That someone says they've tried to apply the rounded corner element directly on a blur, but it didn't round the effect. So I think there might be a little bit of confusion between the blur, which is a tool in our annotations, and the blur region, which is newer to Camtasia.
Yes, this is a great question, and I did gloss past this really too quickly, so I apologize that was confusing. But yes, this is a new effect in Camtasia 2022. We still have our blur annotations, but now we also have this blur region effect. So if I go to Visual Effects, and you can see in the upper right here, I've got this little blur region effect. And so if I go ahead and just remove it from my media here, like, whoa, I can't even, like that actually kind of makes me feel a little seasick. And so I'm just going to drag that back onto this little wavy line asset, and I get all kinds of things. I get, first of all, like controls that I can size this thing independently, but it's coupled to the asset that I added it to. So it's just like the other effects where it belongs to the asset that I added it to. And so then in the blur region effect, I can start to mess with the blurs. I can start to mess with opacity, but here is where the corner rounding comes in. I can go crazy and go all the way up, or I can take away the rounding and make it a sharp edge, which you may prefer here. Or if you want to go into an interesting space, you can invert it, where you're blurring everything but the shape itself. And so here is where you get some really interesting flexible looks. Like obviously it doesn't work here, but it's absolutely something that's useful at times. You can also rotate, and you can change the style of the box. You can change it to a circle, which also has a time and a place. Great question.
Yeah. So unfortunately, there's a ton of questions, but I think I'm going to end with this one as we're still answering questions in the Q&A section. Joe, you've talked about a ton of shortcuts, a ton of keyboard shortcuts. I was hoping you would expose to people in the preferences menu. And this is the same on Windows as it is on Mac, that we have an entire listing of the keyboard shortcuts that exist in the product and that they're customizable, because people are watching you create that grid. They're seeing you do clicking and dragging. So yeah, inside of the properties and system, the properties of Camtasia, both on Mac and Windows, there is a keyboard shortcut section, as Joe is showing, and a lot of headings on the left, but that every single one of them are customizable.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you have a favorite tool that you've mapped some keyboard shortcuts in, bring it over to this view and you can just perform what that is, perform what that shortcut combo is. Maybe it's even a piano chord. And we're going to go ahead and save that for you in your own custom folder. And you can even, you can do all kinds of cool stuff with this feature actually, but it's also a great way to just discover all the various accelerants. Because if you spend a lot of time in the product like I do, you really do need these shortcuts. They speed you up and they make you less reliant on clicking and moving things around and using dexterity. So great question.
100%.
Yeah. JV, can I share one last thing?
Sure. We'll make this the coup de grace.
Okay. Well, in this case, like previously when we were adding those cool gradients, right, from the fills panel, we were getting this really interesting sort of like additive look. And we get that for free because all of these gradients, like in fact, I'll go ahead and just delete that one. All of these gradients have a blend mode associated to them. So this is very subtle, but if I go over to the effects of this clip, which in this case is this multicolor gradient, I can go ahead and cycle through all these different blend modes. Like, look at how beautiful this is and get a totally different look. But there's times where you're going to want to actually apply a blend mode to the asset itself that you're trying to like make a cool effect against. And so in this case, I'm going to actually go back to my dark gradients, and this will be my last beat here, JV. I'm going to grab dark gradient 9. I'm going to drag it underneath, and I'm going to add my blend mode effect to the wavy lines asset. And so in this case, I already added it. Turn it on, and there's my overlay, and I can get even more options. So this is just going to give you totally different looks. Like there's a really cool one, like that one's wild. You can get all kinds of cool treatments, and it's extremely versatile, as powerful as Photoshop in terms of compositing or After Effects, but all inside a super easy drag and drop video editor. So I couldn't be more excited to play with this one. It's a great new feature in 2022.
So don't leave this one. Now I'm going to ask a question from somebody that's on this. Is there a way that they could take these cool blend modes, these cool color overlays, and add their company's colors, their branding?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, JV. So if I get a hold of this this gradient again, so if I go back, oops, you can see, spoiler alert, I've got other cool assets in this folder, and this is at the bit.ly link, bit.ly/Camtasia Design. And so I'm going to go ahead and select this gradient that I just added. First of all, you can see like we've got a ton of really neat tailored gradients that they're all stuff a pro designer would use, if I do say so myself. But we also have this theming capability. So I have a bunch of themes that I've created for my company. And in this case, let's see, I've got Camtasia 1, I've got Oracle, I've got all these kind of cool themes. And so I can just start cycling through and picking out what my corporate brand is. Like there's Audiate, right? And I've got this Auto Shop one that's more of like an explorative theme. And just like that, like I have a completely different look that's aligned with my corporate identity. And it was just a one-click operation. I could drag any gradient down and then just start cycling through the themes that I've created for my corporate brand.
Awesome.
Great
Joe,
question.
I think it's time for you to take a nice cold drink of water, and I think we're gonna end it here today. So a couple things. First, thank you to everybody who attended today's webinar. We had over 1,300 people in there today. The general response is, Joe, you're not off the hook. We're going to find some more time to do these. So if you fill out that survey when you leave today's webinar, let us know what else you want to learn about. I already know that I'm going to ask Joe to teach us more about the library, because this comes as a default library in Camtasia 2022. Nearly everything you saw today can be done with your Camtasia 2022 on your machine right now. I mean, this is just amazing things that we've unearthed for people. I definitely want to thank all the TechSmithies in the background, all the Troys, Fassbender and Stein. We got Robert, Melissa, McKenzie, Carson, Brooks, Alex. Clint was there earlier. He had to drop off, but we want to say thank you to all those people, and to Joe to thank you for presenting this to us today and sharing all this knowledge. Is there anything you'd like to say as some parting knowledge?
I just want to send a note of gratitude for you all again. This is from my heart to yours. Thank you for joining me on this little creative journey. And I look forward to our growing relationship in Camtasia and leveling up and elevating our videos together. Thanks a lot, JV.
Thanks, Joe. And reminder, you will all get a link to this recording in about 24 hours to the email you used to register. So from all of us here at TechSmith, and on behalf of Joe and myself, thanks so much for being a part of this. We'll see you in the next one. TechSmith.com/webinars.
See ya.